what we do to accomplish that is very simple. We create an if statement, and we take our message event, and we figure out whether or not it's null. If it's null, then no one's listening. But if it's not null, then someone is listening, and we need to do something. So if someone's listening, in our case, we want to send them the message that the class has just sent out. And we can do that by taking the message string here and attaching it to a new argument and handing out through the delegate event. So what we'll do here is we'll create a variable for the event args. Very simple. We'll go ahead and pass that down so you can see it. And then we'll take the args and we'll grab that message property that we have and make it equal to the message that's being passed in on the method. And then we'll take that and send it to the listener. It's just that simple. What this does again is it checks to see whether or not someone's listening to the event. If someone is listening, then we create a variable for the event args. We grab that property of the event args and pass it the information, and then we pass that back through the actual event. Now, this has to fire someplace inside of the class so that it's communicating through that event. So what we need to do is we need to have it do something inside the class. So what we do is we call our onMessage somewhere inside the work, and we pass it and I'm going to use a string format here. Pass it a message. Really simple. Better to use a comma than a period there. And we will pass it I, which is the iteration of this. And that's it. We've basically completed, may need an extra parenthesis here, we've basically completed the entire usage of this event for this example right now inside this class. So what we'll do is we'll save this, and we'll go back to the form, and we're going to go to the code behind, and I'll just do that by double clicking on the run button. We need to instantiate, we're going to have to instantiate this class and start doing work with it. But one of the things that's very key in dealing with events and forms is threading. When a call to a work is done, we want that work to be done in the background. We want it done on a different thread. And so what we need to do is, and this gives the user the ability to continue what they're doing with the program instead of being latched onto this one process until it's done. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a background worker, which is probably the easiest way to do a thread. With that background worker, we're going to have to be worried about two events of that background worker, which is the do work. So we'll go ahead and create a method for that, and we'll just use IntelliSense's method stub for that. And we're going to want to deal with the completed portion, which is the run worker completed. And again, we'll let IntelliSense do the work for that. And I'll go ahead and bump that over so it's a little bit easier to see. Even when I do bump it over, it's still not easy to see. It's kind of a little bit larger there, and what we'll do is we'll just move the screen over so you can see it. Then once we've done that, we can go ahead and do a couple things with our form. One of them is to take the run button and make it disabled, because we don't want people to rerun this work while it's already running. And we'll go ahead and let people see the picture box with our fancy moving GIF. So we'll take our picture box progress and make the visible actually seen. And then we'll run our background worker by the run worker asynchronous method. Basically what that does is it steps outside of the form and starts doing work. We want to create an instance of our new class, but we don't want this class to be limited to just the do worker method. So what I'm going to do is create a public variable for that, or actually a private variable. And we'll call this EE. That way it's accessible from other methods, because eventually we're going to be coming back to the run worker completed and etc. And we may be using arguments from the actual class or what have you in case of the form, etc. So in our worker, we can take our private variable and instantiate it. And we can go ahead and execute it, and this will start making the form run. But before we execute it, and I'm sorry about this, we need to go ahead and establish some events, just like we did with the background worker. We used the event of the background worker to create method stub. We need to create a method stub for the actual example that we're using. So we want something to happen when this message executes. We want to do some type of work in relationship to that message. Our do worker is pretty much complete. I know that in our run worker we're going to want to re-enable that button, and we're going to want to hide that picture box. And this is where we talk about forms and their exposure to when we're working with a different thread. We can't just necessarily take information and pass it to these controls, because we're no longer on the same thread as the controls. And I'll give you an example. With the message that fires from the event, we could probably, from a very basic sense, just say we want our label message dot text to equal the e dot message. Well, that's pretty simple, but the trouble is this is not going to work, because when this method fires, it's not going to be able to find the label, because the label's no longer on the same thread. So what we have to do is we have to enable that that label, or we have to find it by invoking it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate method here, and I'm going to move this screen down a little bit so we can see it. And we'll call this the private void update label. We'll call this update message. It's probably better. We'll call this string message. And in this, we need to invoke the label. So we're going to find out if the label actually needs to be invoked first. We do that by calling the invoke required.